Hello, this is John Pugliano. Today I'm coming to you from another road trip. Today I'm on a business trip in Las Vegas, and I want to talk to you about an overlooked area of the economy that's not only overlooked by investors, but also by small business owners. So let me give you a couple ideas here. And this is about the changing nature of not only the economy, but also the stock market. Over the last 15 years or so, we've had extremely low interest rates, which have helped rise all the boats in the economy. But these low rates and easy monetary policies were especially favorable to consumer spending and therefore consumer type products. So, you hear about the economy's, 3 quarters based on consumer spending. Well, that's just a calculation, a way they come up with GDP. There's also a much very reliable and sometimes stronger element of the economy, and that's on the business-to-business sales side of things. So think of it this way. Over the last 15 years, all this cheap consumer spending fueled the stocks of companies like Netflix and Nike. I think we're headed now into a period of more tightening, more restraint. A number of reasons for that. One is to quell some of the inflation that we've seen over these last 15 years, and especially since the pandemic. But there's also elements of how the economy is transitioning as we move to a whole different generational shift. This is more an economy of digitization, which is things like automation and robotics. I wrote a book about that a number of years ago. It's even more relevant today than it was in 2016 when I wrote it. Other elements of the economy that are shifting, though, along with that digitization, it means that we need more infrastructure. We need more electrification of the grid. We're moving less from carbon-based CO2, which is a buzzword. It's not really true. Until we actually go to nuclear, the grid's still going to be run on fossil fuels of some sort. But for easy purposes, we'll call it decarbonization. Again, even though that's not the case. But the economy's moving that way. That means that we need more business-to-business sales to build that infrastructure. Some of the other areas that are undergoing this transition would be things like the fact that the economy is almost barbelled. It's aging on one side with the baby boomers coming out of the marketplace, retiring early and going to be dying off as we go into these next 10 to 20 years. And you have a very substantially large millennial group, which is unusually characteristic to being in the United States. And this is a big advantage that we have over other developed nations like, Japan or Europe, or even China for that matter. So there's huge shifts in the economy that are coming right now. And I believe they favor more industrialization than consumer spending. So how do you take advantage of that? Well, rather than just focusing on the old consumer type products, the Starbucks, the Lululemons, these companies that have profited so well over the last 15 years with the profligate spending, I think, again, because of these trends of digitization, electrification, and deglobalization, which is part of that demographic, all the problems and shifts in geopolitical uncertainty, the emergence of another Cold War brewing. These are all things that are countering some of these deflationary consumer type trends that took jobs out of the U.S. and put them in places like China or other places in Asia. And those were consumer products. So nobody really cared if, consumer type products were being made in a country that maybe wasn't favorable in terms of a national defense situation. But as that Cold War brews more and it becomes evident how things like smartphones and medical supplies and products and pharmaceuticals and the weapon systems and things that are all related to national defense, those things you don't want to necessarily have being made by someone that could be your adversary or your outright enemy. So that's shrinking the whole global trade and really we're seeing for the first time in, I don't know, I guess since World War II, where there's likely to be, if not a total contraction of global trade, certainly at least a peaking of its influence. And again, that puts favor on industrial products because the real important nuts and bolts, the things that really need to run the economy, especially from a national defense standpoint, well, you want those built close to home. And so that favors infrastructure building and investment in the United States. I've been talking about this for a long time too as it relates to energy prices, because since about 2008, the United States, because of its vast resources of not only just straight up oil products, but specifically natural gas, we are about the cheapest neighborhood in the world for manufacturing products. Again, this was a concept I talked about in my book written many years ago about how things like cheap labor that took employment and jobs in manufacturing out of the United States are now less favorable because the energy costs, the transportation costs are so inexpensive in the US compared to the rest of the world. And when you factor in the digitization and automation and robotics, which counteract the higher cost of labor, you can actually make things not only equally at a cost basis here in the United States, but since it's in your own backyard, you don't have to worry about just-in-time deliveries or supply chain disruptions or all the problems that we've seen with COVID and the supply issues over these past 3 years. And so my premise is that once we come through this current iteration of Fed tightening cycle that we're in, that the new leadership that emerges isn't going to be necessarily those old consumer-driven products, but it's going to be more those industrial, business-to-business, nuts and bolts, more strategic type companies. And again, so this transition away from the consumer-driven products to more the nuts and bolts, strategic, business-to-business, industrial conglomerate type companies, you're talking about things that are going to favor more like, Caterpillar, Honeywell, these industrial type companies, and not even limited to what you would think about as pure, manufacturing-based companies like a steel company or a cement plant, but also in terms of some consumer-type products or things you might think of consumer-type products like airlines. Okay, this is a great example of where you have a company like Delta Airlines, and you have a company like Southwest. Southwest is known to cater to the casual, recreational, tourist type individual, the individual consumer. And they've been great at it for many years, although they've faltered here lately. But consumer-based is something like Southwest. Delta, on the other hand, yes, there's plenty of retail people that fly on that. Mom and pop's going on vacation will use Delta. But at the same time, if you're a business executive, you're probably not going to fly the less expensive, discounted Southwest Airlines, right? You're going to fly first class or business class on Delta. You're willing to pay that extra premium, which means higher profitability and more seating capacity for a company like Delta. And the key point I want to make in this video is, why are business travelers more likely, and companies that focus on business-to-business sales and revenue, why are they more likely to get this higher profitability and higher revenue? And it's because that business executive is flying first class. He's not paying for it with his own money, right? It's other people's money. It's the shareholders' money. CEOs are not much different than drunken congressmen, right? They're happy to spend other people's money. And so I believe, again, as we move into this more transition of the economy, you want to look for opportunities in that industrial side or that business side. This also relates to those of you that are small business owners. Look at diversifying the people you sell to not only being individual consumers, but ask yourself, how can you profit by selling to more business-related type companies? Business-to-business sales should really be a key for you going into the future. I'll sum all this up too by just giving you one more illustration of where I'm at and what I'm doing. You may look around and say, John, why are you staying in a 5-star hotel? I mean, it's not a secret that I'm a very frugal and some would say cheap individual. Well, all that's true, but the reason that I would choose to stay in an expensive hotel on a trip like I'm on now is because it's not my money, right? It's a business expense. And you're saying, but John, you own the business, and so therefore it is your money. Not necessarily true. And before we even get to that aspect of it, let's look at staying at a more luxurious hotel or a place where I have a business suite as compared to just staying at a place that's a typical, 2 or 3 star hotel that a cheapskate would normally stay at. Well, I'm on this trip on business, right? It's not for pleasure, it's for business. And as a business operator, right, I got to have a very good work area where I can be productive during my business hours. I also maybe are going to be meeting with clients. I need an area where we can sit and talk in private. So in effect, this isn't just a hotel room for me to sleep in like it would be if I was on a vacation. This is my mobile business office, at this point. So I'm willing to spend more for that because of the benefit and the utility I receive out of it. The other part is, and this is where it's not my money, okay? Because again, if it were totally my money, I'd be probably working out of my car because I am a cheapskate, right? How do you think I got to be so rich? But the other aspect of it is it's not my money. You see, if you're a successful business operator, then it's highly likely that you are in an extortionary tax rate. And so your sales revenue is not yours. You only get to keep the pass-through income. And before it ever gets to you, the government in all its various forms is likely shaving off, 45 to maybe 50% of all the business revenue you bring in. And so legitimate, honest, and credible business expenses are not coming off your bottom line. They're coming off the top line. So by the time this 5-star hotel room, that cost of that trickles down to my pass-through income, it really, out of my own pocket, is about the same amount of money that it would be if I stayed at a 3-star hotel. So why stay at the 3-star hotel when the personal cost to me is the same, and I not only get all the attributes that I can use to make myself more productive while I'm on the road, I also get the benefit of the personal attributes that go along with staying in the nicer hotel room because, look at this bathroom. It's larger than a traditional hotel room would be. So business owners, I know you're frugal, but don't be a cheapskate. Don't be penny wise and pound foolish. Learn the rules and regulations, understand how to play the game, and then make it work for your advantage. Hey, one final tip. I'm a gadget guy, and I carry a variety of electronics with me. Everything from computers to audio, video, recording equipment. Oftentimes I'll bring my ham radio with me because I love to do that hobby from the road. And when you're carrying stuff and you got to network it all together, you got to have the right tools and components to make it all work. If you forget something or you get out on the road, you don't have the tool you need, if you buy it locally, you're probably going to have to pay an extortionary amount for it. So my tip for all business travelers, and especially if you're going to be in Vegas, bring your own stripper.